Hi, I'm Mark Bowen. I've been an artist since as long as I can remember. Always want to create. I was an artist through high school and AP art, and I've grown up and lived in Battle Creek the last 30 years. Um, Spent 8 years as a chef, which you'd think, well, at least you get to be creative, but it turns to a miserable life after a while. Then I started working at the art center. I mean, I've had other couple other small jobs, but nothing else really. Spent a few years at KCC taking art classes and pretty much every art class of that. Well, I mean, I started out like most kids did with crayons and paper and Play-Doh, but always wanted to try new things, always wanted to make my own new things, so, started making my own Play-Doh and sculpting that, and then I moved up to paint, and I think that was junior high. I started really painting. I've always sketched and drawn since I can remember. There was a little skeezy place on one of the bad streets in my neighborhood where I'd hang out for a few hours a week, but I'd get there early, sitting on the corner, waiting for these guys to show up so I could sit and draw comics. And then high school, junior high, I started painting and started with the tempera poster paint type stuff. Then I moved on to acrylics, and eventually, even in high school, I was doing oils in my AP art class. Um, Started going to KCC, did a lot of photography for a while. Started with the pottery program, and I was still taking, various painting, drawing, 3D design, graphic design, Photoshop during this time, but I started with my focus more on painting, and then it moved more towards the ceramics and pottery. And stopped going to college around 2006 or 7, and so I didn't have access to a pottery kiln or a pottery studio or kiln or anything. So I kind of fell out of it for a while. I came to the art center in probably 2011 or 12, and started back up with my art then, and did pottery here for about a year and a half, and then was asked if I'd like to start teaching pottery. So that was fun, but you start working full time somewhere, you don't want to work part time and full time at the same place. So I kind of dropped my instructions and just worked for the art center. Although I still do my pottery, and probably the last couple years, I've really delved into just a little everything. I mean, but my main focus has been glass mostly, so it's a whole new world. I mean, in there, there's other mediums that I've tried between, I would say stopping classes at KCC in 2007, and between now I've done sewing and knitting and learning blacksmithing and bladesmithing and welding and just a little bit of everything. I mean, I've always had a little bit of skills with woodworking just growing up with my dad, so that always kind of peeks its head in on this project or that project. So it's kind of a crazy, sporadic journey, a little ADD here and there with it. When I'm working with glass, I work with what's called borosilicate. It's a harder glass. You guys probably know it as Pyrex. And that all comes in rods and tubes and various colors. And I mean, you're just working it in the flame, melting it, and you gotta kind of know the beast after a while. I mean, you've gotta feel everything you're doing. It's constant tactile. I mean, you're constantly working with gravity and just feeling out how the glass wants to move, working against gravity too, and surface tension. And so, I mean, there's a lot with flame chemistry and temperature that contributes to the way the glass works and the way the glass reacts. With glass, there's a lot of other things to take into consideration other than your artistic vision or how you want it to turn out. You have to consider a lot of chemistry and physics when you're doing it. So The glass is always liquid, always moving, and the colors are going to react depending on the chemistry of the flame. So you have to take that in mind as you're planning your entire project, along with working through the steps to get to your end goal. Glass is a learning by failure. You're going to throw out 10 times what you're ever going to keep. And it's just part of the game. It can be frustrating, but I think it teaches me patience and just, I mean, I hate to be cliche, but to go with the flow of the glass. I've always been attracted to mediums that both you can fabricate. I guess mediums that you fabricate, but even more so mediums where fire and dirt essentially are coming together to create a completely different item. I mean, you take the glass and it starts as sand before I get it, but even then it's still sand. It's just melted together and fire, and that's how I manipulate it. And then I was into pottery, which again, fire and dirt manipulating to create something. Then the metal, I mean, metal and glass are probably the closest related, just in the way you work them in the flame and the way you treat them. I mean, you can't make metal or glass do something it doesn't want to do. Working with glasses takes a lot of time, and my hours are limited to the number of hours I can get behind the torch. In the time that I've been working, which is, it's been almost 2 years, but I only get about between an hour and 5 hours a week. I do a lot of solid work still, working with color and understanding those colors and the way they react to the flame, and then working with some silver and some gold, and that just adds a whole nother dimension to the color. I have started more recently working a lot more hollow, but again, it's my 10-to-1 ratio, so I've got about 1-2 pieces that I even appreciate. I wouldn't say I'm even proud, I just appreciate the amount of work I put into them and what I was able to succeed at. Again, it's going to be time and practice, but there's an addiction. I'm drawn to it. So I'm most proud of my pendants right now. I think I get a lot of compliments, so I'm, the artist in me, is constantly criticizing what I'm making, but people appreciate my art, so I know I'm getting somewhere. In my painting, I've always been attracted to the surrealist, the landscape, and not necessarily portraits, more of the character. I mean, being able to illustrate a certain character without clues other than that person to kind of what type of person they are. Even more recently, I have been trying to capture likeness, and I've seen many painters, they'll paint someone and slight resemblance, the features are all there's just something missing. So in order to hone my skills in being able to capture and present that likeness of that person, I've been working on caricatures, bring it to that extreme so that when I bring it back down, I'll know those parts that I need to accentuate, and just to bring out that person. I mean, most anybody that paints can paint a person, but there's just that likeness is the life that you put into the person. When you get that likeness and somebody recognizes it as instantly as that person, that's because you've finally figured out what gives that person their spark. In the future, I'm heading toward trying to incorporate all my mediums. I mean, I think that's the end goal with every artist, is just kind of be able to master or understand a medium enough to combine it with the other mediums understand or have mastered, And I'm also a tinkerer, so some of my work is not necessarily artistic, but the process that I've had to go through to design it, or things that I have in the future that I have planned to design, I have to use my artistic, um, not vision, I don't like that word, artistic abilities to kind of see, the spatial reasoning and understand what's gonna make it work and what's gonna make it aesthetically pleasing. So, I dabble in electronics and little things like that. That's just part of my tinkering. I don't necessarily consider it art, but it's things that I would like to incorporate in my future projects. As artists, I think we're all critical of ourselves, and I am more than guilty of that. I constantly question every piece of art I've made, and I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. It does push us, but it can be crippling. It can stop you in your tracks for years, and I've run into that. So I think that's part of where my need to branch out and diversify my art, just so I don't get burnt out. And even though I'm not happy about something, I'm not burnt out on it either, so I'll know I can pick it up another time when I'm maybe in the right mindset or the right mood to create something I am pleased with.